Okay, we are getting going. Oh my gosh, took me a minute. Sorry, I am late. Okay, hello everyone. So we are streaming live on Instagram and on my Facebook business page, which is just Jenna Pacelli over on Facebook. If you want to join there, I will also post this to my YouTube after the fact. So if you don't follow me over there, head over there and we will get started. So we are going to be talking today about trauma proofing yourself. So what does that mean? We are looking to build resilience in our nervous system, and specifically around the area of what we call resourcing. So I'm going to talk a little bit about why we want to access these parts of the nervous system, why we want to build our resilience, and how we can create some padding around our lives to the point that we can go through stressful events and not necessarily build up trauma and stress symptoms, right? So where we want to start with that is the fact that trauma lives in the body, not in the story, right? So telling your story, the problem with telling your story is that it's only accessing your cognitive mind, okay? It's a very small portion of the brain and your psyche, right? So telling the story over and over again, maybe through years of talk therapy, is only going to cement the body's response to the trauma. One catchphrase in neuroscience these days is what fires together, wires together. So if we keep telling the story without integrating it into the body's response to that story, we are going to continue to have symptoms, right? So we want to, if we're going to tell the story, which it can be helpful, I'm not saying it's not always helpful, but if we're going to tell the story, there needs to be an educated and aware ability to access the body's response to that story. Okay, so the story on its own is not enough, and it's not going to heal people. Okay, I feel really passionate about this. I spent 6 years of my life in talk therapy that was helpful for building insight, and it was very psychoanalytical, old school, like Adlerian psychotherapy. That was helpful. And then I spent 6 months in somatic therapy after that, and was able to actually make the changes that I needed to make coming from that awareness, right? So the awareness is not enough. A lot of us know what to do, we just don't do it. Okay. And so we need to start to access different parts of the body's response, right? We need to start to change the way that we're responding in our life. So what we want to do, and I'm going to get into some how-tos to give you some exercises, but I'm also going to explain what some of this is, and why we need to do it. So there's in the somatic trauma resolution world, we talk about a blue zone and a red zone, right? And blue zone versus red zone, this is also trauma vortex and counter vortex. So if you imagine like an eddy in a river that's spinning one way, right? We can get stuck. It's like a whirlpool, and we can get stuck if you've ever been rafting before, you may have gotten stuck in an eddy, and it can be challenging and maybe even dangerous, right? The counter vortex to the trauma is the thing that's going to pull you out of the response of that whirlpool. And if you remember from my last video about what traumatic memory is, a traumatic memory is just an encapsulated memory that's not being updated, right? So we are working to release the memory so that it can be updated, and we can have a healthier response or a more adaptive response to our life, right? So the trauma vortex is, we also call this the red zone. The counter vortex is the blue. So if you imagine it's like a figure 8, and they're counteracting each other, counterbalancing each other. Okay. In our brains, the way that this works in our brains, and what we call this is in the amygdala, where we have our fight, flight, freeze responses, we either are going to be safety mapping, or danger mapping. Okay, so it's again similar to that, the red zone, blue zone, and whatever we continue to focus on, we are going to grow. Okay, so in the amygdala, if we are danger mapping, it means it's like we put on a pair of glasses and so I've got my glasses on, and if I've had some dangerous or what felt dangerous to me, whether it was emotional, physical, mental event happened to me that felt overwhelming and dangerous. If I don't heal that, I'm going to continue to walk around with these lenses that tells my brain danger, 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 danger. Okay, red zone, red zone, red zone, trauma vortex, trauma vortex, trauma vortex, right? What we need to do then is start to shift the brain's focus over to the blue zone, the counter vortex, so that it's like we're taking those red glasses off and we're putting on our counter vortex glasses, right? So when we're doing that, we are rewiring the way that the brain is responding to, the brain and the body and the nervous system are responding to our environment. Okay. So if you have questions, please let me know, of course, and I will answer them at the end. I'm going to go through the content first, and then I will answer them at the end. Okay. So let me just be sure we're over here. So, okay. So from there, so we've got counter vortex and trauma vortex. This is also, if we think about the window of tolerance, this is related to the window of tolerance. So the nervous system, again, with fight, flight, and freeze, we go about our day. I talked about this last week, right? Where we're like normal day, some stressors, some relaxation, some stressors, some relaxation. If there's an overwhelmingly stressful event, I might go into a fight, flight, sympathetic nervous system activation on. It's like the gas pedal. Body says, stressful, on, right? And then hopefully I can resolve it and feel safe again, come back into the window of tolerance. That doesn't always happen. So when I'm up here, I'm on gas pedal going, fight, flight. If that doesn't get resolved, and you'll see this in most animals as well, okay? We have almost the exact same neurophysiology as our dogs, as our cats, and as the lizards in our backyard, okay? We have the same physiology. And so in that way, it's kind of nice because it's simple. Fight, flight, fight, flight. If that doesn't get resolved, I go down into a parasympathetic freeze response. This is parasympathetic is usually rest and digest. That's the brake pedal. As we all know, if we drive a car, we don't want to slam on the brake pedal, and we also don't want to slam on the gas. We want to ease in, ease out, makes for a more pleasant ride rather than jerking in and out, right? So if we're not responding well, and if our window of tolerance is narrow, which means we don't have a lot of resilience or we're easily stressed, we're going to go into the fight and flight, and we might go into a freeze much more easily. Now, if we've had trauma, if we've had chronic stress, if we've had chronic pain, if we've had things happening over and over again that were stressful to our nervous system, we tend to reduce our desire to experience life, right? So we get really small. We make our lives smaller and smaller so that we don't feel so stressed, right? So a really classic example is agoraphobia. I don't want to leave my house because I'm too anxious for social interaction. I've just made my life super small, right? And so one of the ways that we know we're healing from trauma is when people start to have more varied responses to their life. It's not the same habitual response to some stressor or some related stressor, okay? So in this, we're to build our resilience through life and build our resilience to stress and to trauma, so we're not walking around with all these symptoms. We want to expand that window of tolerance. All right, so be sure to put comments below or questions if you have them. And also let me know if you're coming in live. You can drop a 1. If you're watching the recording, drop a 2. Let me know how you're watching this and where you're from. I'd love to know where you're from. Okay, so back to this idea of the window of tolerance. If we think about the car, we're jerking back and forth. We want to ease into that. We ease into it, go on the gas pedal, we ease out of it, the brake pedal. This is how we want to go in to somebody's nervous system and body to help them start to renegotiate and feel, dare I say, safe again. Sometimes safe, safe, hang on a second. Okay, back. We're back. So if we want to, it's not all about pushing, 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 pushing. Okay, we used to think that, hi Karen, good to see you. We used to think that like catharsis, like back in the 60s and 70s, we used to think in therapy that if you just screamed and cried and punched a pillow and got it all out and had these big releases that you would feel better. It's actually not true. So we don't want to just keep pushing into something because it doesn't give the body time to negotiate and integrate. Okay, so if you remember from last week, the lower parts, the subcortical parts of the brain, amygdala, brainstem, hippocampus, things like that, in the lower parts of the brain into the body, process 11 million bits of information per second. And in the neocortex, we are processing 60 bits of information per second. So 60 in the newest part of the brain where we have our conscious thought, and then 11 million bits of information in the lower parts of the brain. And so I bring this up because it's so important to understand that the integration of that takes time, right? Because the body is having to process so much more than the conscious mind, okay? So we have to work at the body level to start to help people feel better. Okay, and so I think it's important too. So there's a study done by David Levy in 1946, and he did research in a New York hospital, and he found that children's responses to hospitalization were similar to and as severe as the experience of shell shock veterans. Okay, so this just goes to show how much the body can store, and specifically with children, how fewer resources they have to process something stressful. And if they aren't able to, they can have the same symptoms as somebody with a big T trauma, like being in war. Okay. But we also, as adults, can have the same kinds of responses and nervous system dysregulation as some of those big T traumas as well. Okay, so we're talking about resourcing, which means when we're resourcing somebody, we're building their window of tolerance, their ability to tolerate stress, and we're building their blue zone, and we're building their safety mapping. We're training them to safety map, which means to see the world and as a safe, generally safe place, right? With, of course, common sense, right? There are some things that aren't safe, but to help them go through the world and walk through their lives in a way that they feel they're generally safe, they're generally okay. Ideally. All right, so a resource is anything that connects us with a deeper capacity for organization. In mental health, we want both hemispheres of the brain to be talking to one another. This is organization, this is integration. We also want the body and the mind to be talking to one another, and we want to be able to update things as needed, right? So a resource is also a bridge to deeper connection with others, and they can be internal and external anchors that help the client feel calmer, or the person feel calmer and less activated, right? So they have the resources and the capacity needed to renegotiate the process without being overwhelmed. So once somebody is resourced enough, that's the beginning of the stress and trauma work. If they are not resourced enough, and I worked with a lot of folks this way, especially coming into wilderness, because it was a much more acute population with more acute trauma generally, where they were not set up because they were working with an inexperienced clinician. And by inexperience, I mean inexperience with trauma, because it's different than any other thing. With a clinician that pushed them too far, too fast, didn't know, and the person is their fuses are blown. So they weren't keeping them in their window of tolerance. Okay. So I would see a lot of folks in wilderness come to me completely dysregulated, dissociating, and not staying in their bodies or able to do any kind of significant trauma work because they didn't have the internal resources to do that. Okay. So when you're looking for a therapist and you're looking for trauma work, and if you want somebody local, you need to ask them how much training they have had in trauma. Okay. It's not a small thing, and we can re-traumatize people. And it's really important that you have somebody that knows what to do with the experiences of dissociation and things that are more complex. Okay. And so I will say too that I work with people from all over the world. I have clients all over the country, and I do specific somatic trauma resolution work with them, which I can do and I'm trained to do in anywhere in the world. So with the different certifications that I have, I can operate under those certifications as opposed to somebody's license where they can only practice in that state. Okay. So I have both the certificates that allow me to do that, but also the licensure in the states that I work in. And I worked really hard to have both of those things, okay? So that I could work with people anywhere. And so we're going back to resourcing. Thank you. So we are going back to, we want to also help the person when we are resourcing them have positive, what's called sensory motor states. So in the body, so the ability to feel a sense of okayness or even just neutrality in the body and be able to sense where that is inside of them. Okay. Now, if you're somebody that has struggled a lot with dissociation, leaving your body, or even you just kind of zone out, it doesn't have to be that extreme, but you tend to leave when you're stressed and you're just not quite there, you're not embodied. This can take some time and negotiation to find the things inside and the places inside that feel okay. Or if your body just doesn't feel safe in general, it's going to be more challenging, but it's totally workable. Okay. So if you tend to err on more like the depressive or foggy side of things, I feel foggy, I feel disconnected, I feel zoned out. These are all the words I hear people say. I feel depressed, I feel cold and frozen, or I don't feel anything, I feel numb. Those are the kinds of states we have to take to heart and really respect, and we have to work with those in a compassionate, slow way to help them feel some of these positive sensory motor states. Okay. So we want to help them also, we want to help you feel a sense of self. So it's like the stuffing in a teddy bear. I want to feel like I'm a whole self. I don't want to feel like I'm somebody else or that I'm merging with other people. And I want to feel a sense of inter integrity, even in the face of disruption or of dysregulation or stress. Okay. So things that might have thrown me for a loop, if I get resourced and I get help resourcing, I'm going to be able to stay in my body, stay connected to myself, even in the face of stress. Okay. So we want to help somebody feel these things, and this can take some time or it can be pretty quick depending on the person's experience, right? So the difference between us and animals in terms of needing resources and our ability to not hold on to trauma symptoms, where like animals are, especially wild animals, are able to just release things, shake them off. And there's another video that I call Somatic Psychology 101 on my YouTube page that I explain more about this. And it's kind of like it's a good intro to all of this if you're interested in that. So the difference between us and wild animals in particular is that there is that the ability to release the symptoms is overridden in human beings by our very strong neocortex. Okay, so we're inhibiting through the rational mind the release of the trauma symptoms and the release of just the physiological activation that happens in the face of stress. Okay, so we basically clamp down on that, like that. We're like holding on really tight because we don't know how to release it. And this can lead to a whole host of symptoms like pain, patterns of feeling like stuck or frozen or collapsing under the weight of different emotions, having distorted thoughts or what we call cognitions, anxiety, or a sense of feeling intruded upon. Like if I don't want to, like I'm very sensitive to somebody like coming into my space or my boundaries. So we are working to help people let go of some of the inhibitions that will help them heal and move through the traumatic symptoms, right? So we often do this through body sensation work, but there's a lot of ways to do this, and we want to be able to restore the person's what we call physiological action patterns. We want them to work through and be able to complete any fight, flight, freeze response that didn't complete in the body before. Okay. Otherwise, if this wasn't regulated, if we didn't have some of this like trauma first aid right on hand right away, these arousal states, and by arousal I mean stress states, can get locked in to our neuromusculature and central nervous system. Okay, and then we can't discharge or complete them, and then we prevent ourselves from resolving the traumatic symptoms. Okay, so um how do we know when a person's nervous system is in balance and at rest? We need to be able to retrain people's bodies and brains if they are not experiencing these things. So this is what we want to experience. We want them to feel relaxed and at ease most of the time in their life. Okay. If you have lived with a high level of anxiety most of your life, and this can get passed on in utero. So if mom was really anxious or stressed, the baby is bathing in stress hormones, and it comes out literally more stressed than they otherwise would have been. So sometimes we don't even know what this would feel like because we just run anxious. So that's like some people. Or if mom was really depressed, okay, um, uh, then we can feel like kind of an apathy or a flat affect, or like not a lot of emotion or numbness. Okay, so I know for me, I run more on the anxious side. I run more on the type A side. And this has been like a revelation for me to feel a sense of relaxation and ease more often than not. Okay. And I feel it the more frequently I'm having somatic sessions with my somatic practitioner, the more I'm feeling this, the more I'm training. Remember the blue zone, the safety mapping, right? The more I'm able to access that. So we want people to feel relaxed and at ease. We want the body to be relaxed yet alert. Something that I would see a lot when I was teaching yoga full time in San Francisco, and I saw it later in various settings as well, is oftentimes people would get really relaxed in my classes and then fall asleep. Just completely fall asleep. And that means one, they're probably exhausted. And two, their bodies or their nervous systems are not used to feeling a sense of relaxation with alertness. And their nervous system goes straight towards, relaxation means sleep. Okay. And I have a free yoga nidra resource. It's a deep relaxation technique on my website at jennapacelli.com. You will feel free to download that. It's totally free. That trains you in this. So the relaxation plus alertness, right? Sounds good, huh? I think we all want to feel that way. The person we want the person to be embodied, so in their bodies, able to feel sensation and be able to articulate sensation, and present through all the layers of themselves. They're present to all the layers of their experience, whether that's physical, emotional, psychological or mental, and even spiritual. We want them awake and aware and connected to the full experience of their life, right? And so the somatic work is so deeply valuable in restoring someone's vitality in this way. Okay. So we also want the person and their physiology, the way that their body responds to things, to match what's happening in their life. Okay. So we want it to be appropriate. So if it's a stressful thing, like truly life threatening, we want them to go into a fight, flight, freeze response. We do want that. Okay. We want them to be able to respond. But if it's like, oh, I got a nasty email from my boss again, and they go straight into fight, flight, freeze, and then can't get out of it, that's a different experience. We want to help them move through that, right? So we also want the person to be fluid. We call this cognitively, we call this psychological flexibility. So we want them to be able to, again, respond to life in a pretty flexible, for the most part, with boundaries, flexible, but boundaried and healthy way. Okay. Okay. Somebody's calling me. Don't want that. Okay. We're back. So all right. So then we also want the person to be available for connection and emotionally steady and stable. It's not high highs and high lows, which is more of a borderline personality disorder feature, right? Really high highs and really low lows. And there's other psychological things that we would diagnose. I'm not a big diagnostician. I don't love diagnoses insofar as it just tells us a cluster of symptoms. But we want the person to be relatively steady and stable, relatively and then available again for connection. We need the person to be able to be, rather than totally avoidant and disconnected, when somebody's healed from trauma and stress, or able to be resilient in the face of those things, they are also available for vulnerability. They're available for intimacy. They're available for a depth of relationship. Okay. And then they'll also we want them to experience choices and options. We don't want them to feel like, if they're like they only have one option in life, or they keep dating the same person over and over again, the same kind of person, or they only feel like they've got one way of responding to some event, right? We want them to be able to, again, be flexible and fluid within reason. Okay. And then again, we want them to have the capacity for healthy relationships and intimacy. Okay. So I want to go through a few exercises to help you and get you started. And if you're looking to schedule a session with me, you can go to bendtraumatherapy.com, BEND traumatherapy.com. You can also just Google my name, Jenna Pacelli. That'll take you to my website. I've got a bunch of free resources for you on jennapacelli.com. And you can schedule sessions with me there. Okay, an intro session. I offer free 15-minute intro sessions, and we can integrate some of these pieces and go through some of these elements for you. So one of the practices here. So the first one is is a grounding practice. And if you're in a chair, see if you can bring your feet to the ground and feel both evenly, uncross the legs, and bring your attention into the lower body, especially connecting into the feet and feeling the weight of the lower body in the chair and the weight of the feet on the floor. Okay, so allowing your consciousness and your awareness is like shining a flashlight down into those areas of the body. Can also notice the back against the chair, whatever you're sitting on. I like that one too, noticing my back. Just making contact. Just making contact. And you're just allowing yourself to sink into the back side of the body for this grounding practice. right? You're noticing that. Notice your response. Does it feel nice to notice the internal experience of the body? Does it feel stressful? And if it feels stressful, I want you to keep the eyes open and you redirect the attention elsewhere. Again, we're not pushing, we're not forcing, we're just noticing and allowing. Okay, we're noticing and following your nervous system's response. Okay, so that's number one, grounding. Okay, noticing the body, noticing the feet on the floor. Okay, and you can spend a few minutes there. You could set a timer for yourself, even if it's 1 or 2 minutes during the day, if that's helping you. Another one, self-contact. So I'm going to bring one hand to the forehead, one hand to the back of the head. And if it feels okay, if it feels soothing, to close the eyes, you can, and feel the contact of your hands on your head. I was talking to an energy worker friend of mine today, and she said that this practice activates or connects to the water element in Chinese medicine. And the water element helps regulate fear. Just notice you might have yawning, I'm about to yawn. Yawning, you might have some heat in the body, you might have some tingling. You might have different varying responses. Just allow whatever response is there to be there. You could combine this with feeling the weight of the lower body as well, what we did before, the grounding exercise before. And then release when you feel ready. You could spend more time there if you wanted. And then orientation. So looking around, noticing things in your environment that are soothing to you, that you like. You kind of imagine that your head, your neck, your eyes had minds of their own, and you just look around, notice where you are again. You can remind yourself that you're here and now in your environment. Like I'm seeing some pictures of people I love. And then I notice there's like a heart opening sensation inside, some warmth in my legs coming through, seeing a picture on my wall that I think is really beautiful. Okay. Good. And then the fourth one is more of an external thing. So you can use like a warm drink. Like I like to have tea in session to help it's really regulating for the nervous system, whether it's a warm drink or a heating pad. I've got a heating pad on my lap right now with a blanket over me. That's really nice for me. Or a weighted blanket. Okay. Especially if you're more prone toward dissociation, checking out, numbness, fogginess, feeling zoned out. It's all going to help bring you back to earth, back here in your present moment, and soothe the nervous system. Okay. So please let me know if you have any questions. I'll take questions now. And I think somebody asked about Lennon. Karen, yes. Karen, thank you for asking about Lennon. Lennon is my Great Pyrenees dog. He is a therapy dog, and he has been really sick with valley fever, and he's getting better every day. So this is a great example of when we can choose to use the trauma vortex or use the counter vortex, or a safety map versus danger map, right? A lot of vets have been pretty pessimistic or just very neutral about his prognosis. And I just kept trying to focus on the little improvements he was making. And I think that he feels that, and he's making those improvements. And he is starting to be able to stand more on his back legs. So he hasn't been able to walk for about a month. And that's been really challenging for me and my partner, and we're doing it. So yeah, so thank you for asking about him. It's been kind of a roller coaster, and he keeps making progress, and that's what I keep focusing on. So thank you for asking. If you're not connected with me, I have two accounts. I'm over at Jenna Pacelli Therapy and at Jenna Pacelli. I think I might have accidentally I think I recorded my live on Jenna Pacelli. I meant to record this over on Jenna Pacelli Therapy. I have both accounts there. The therapy one, of course, is purely therapeutic, clinical psychology, trauma resolution, stress resolution work. But I'm kind of interchanged the two. And then I am at jennapacelli.com and Bend Trauma Therapy, like Bend, Oregon, or like a bend in a river. Okay, so I live up in Bend, Oregon, but I see people from all over the country and the world for stress and trauma resolution sessions. So feel free to book with me over at bendtraumatherapy.com. You can also find that link over on the therapy tab of jennapacelli.com. And then on Jenna Pacelli, I have a bunch of free resources for you. Yoga Nidra, which helps train the body to be relaxed but alert rather than relaxed and asleep, which can be useful. Both are useful, but a lot of times during the day, we want the relaxed, alert feeling. And then I have essential oils for emotional wellness guide. I've got a mindful mornings guide. I have what else? A self-care for driven people. If you're more on the anxious or type A side and need some support around regulating yourself and caring for yourself, even though you've got big goals and dreams, I've got a free guide over there for you too. So feel free to head over there and subscribe to the newsletter, and I will be in touch with you. And again, if you're watching live, drop a 1. If you're watching the recording, drop a 2, that I know when you're coming in. And I'm on here every Monday. Tomorrow on Jenna Pacelli, I'm going to be going live about essential oil safety. So if you're interested in that and how to use them safely and productively, tune in tomorrow. Okay. So I'll see you soon, and really good to connect with you. All right. Bye-bye.